Great, everybody. If you're just tuning in, you're in the right place for the SOMM Journal's webinar on Wine Victoria. I'm just going to give it a minute for everybody to get on board, and then we'll get started. All right, we seem to have leveled off. So good day, everybody. Good day, as they say down under. This is Lars Leicht with the SOMM Journal. Welcoming you all to our webinar on Wine Victoria. Good morning if you're on the west coast of the United States. Good afternoon if you're on the east coast of the United States. And good very, very early morning to all our winemakers from Australia who have tuned in at 6 a.m. Thank you guys for that sacrifice. We know that's always a little bit of a challenge, that time zone. So thank you for getting up and kind of priming your wine with a little coffee probably, and then moving straight into the wine. So we greatly appreciate that. I just want to remind everybody that this is being recorded. It will be on sommjournal.com, and we will also be on the Facebook platform of SOMM Journal Facebook Live. So it is great to be here. We're talking about a very exciting place in general with Australia, but Victoria is a very special part of Australia. It's one of the more historic winemaking regions, and certainly one of the more varied winemaking regions. It's got some incredible varied terroirs and geological wonders. It goes from the ocean to the Alps, and has 21 different regions in it, making a wide range of varieties from the Pinot Coast to Shiraz in the center, beautiful cool climate Pinot Noir and Chardonnay coming out of Yarra, Italian varieties coming out of King Valley, Muscats coming out of Brethurglen. There's just a plethora of wine styles, and I'm really looking forward to diving into it. So without further ado, Kate Criven of Wine Victoria, welcome. Thank you for being here this early morning, and tell us what we're in for, please.
Thank you, Lars, and thank you to the SOMM Journal for putting this together. It's very exciting. I just wanted to thank everyone for dialing in and taking the time. Give you a bit of an overview about why we're here. Basically, Wine Victoria has been fortunate enough to secure government funding from the Victorian government, and that is to promote Victorian wines in the US. This is a really exciting opportunity for us, and based on the number of registrations we had, it shows that people are really interested to learn, which is a really great start. I think we're on the right track to people are interested. I think a lot of you will probably remember Australian wines from the 90s, where we had our big bold Shiraz getting 100 points from Robert Parker. We've also got the critter labels with yellowtail. And so what we want to share with you today is that Australia has a lot more to offer. Victoria is the smallest mainland state, and as Lars mentioned, we've got 21 wine regions, which is a lot. This gives us a huge level of diversity, and I guess the reason for that vast number of regions is the terroir of Victoria. We've got the Great Dividing Range coming in down the east and bending off through the centre, and that gives us a lot of different aspects and soil profiles, which our experts will talk you through a bit later. We are sectioned off from New South Wales with the Murray River. Now, I guess you would say the Murray River to Australia is, I guess, the Mississippi to America, or the Seine to France, and it's super important to our agriculture here in Victoria. I won't go into too much depth. There are 800 family-owned wineries, and that's more than any other state. So I think that what that brings is just that level of passion and that level of sustainability in terms of planning for the future. So we've got a great list of wines for you to taste, and Lars will take you through them. And we've got winemakers that have very generously given up their time this morning to talk you through their wines. So I'll hand you back to Lars, and I will start presenting and show you our map.
Great, thank you. So some of you have some of these wines were sent through to you in small sample bottles. So thank you guys for doing that through SOMM Foundation. If you do, or if you're one of those lucky, fortunate people that have the wines to taste with us, I invite you to get started with that. And our first wine is going to be the Zilzi Sauvignon Blanc. And there's all the wine regions we were talking about. As Kate was saying, talking about that great dividing range, and how this comes off it. And you've got the Tasman Sea, the Indian Ocean, and then the mountains to the back that really make this quite a unique area. So Kate, who is presenting the Murray-Darling region? I believe is our first area that we're going to talk about.
There we go. We'll let Caroline jump in.
Great.
Courtney.
Introduce yourself,
sorry.
please.
Courtney. Got too many C's at Zilzy.
Yeah,
Thanks,
hi,
Courtney.
thank you. Thank you, Lars. Yeah, I'm Courtney Wills. I'm a winemaker here at Zilzy Wines. So Zilzy is located, as you mentioned, in the Murray-Darling region of Victoria. We're approximately 240 miles from the nearest coast and only 150 feet above sea level. Just to talk about Zilzy briefly, so Zilzy is a family-owned winery and vineyards. We have approximately 1,600 acres planted currently. The wine in particular that I'll be talking about today is the Zilzy Victoria Sauvignon Blanc. I think it's a fantastic example of a Murray-Darling Sauvignon Blanc. Stylistically, I think it sits somewhere between a Californian and a New Zealand Sauv Blanc, but it doesn't have the grassy sort of asparagus characters of a Marlborough. Kim, did you want to talk about Murray-Darling region in a little bit more detail?
Yeah, absolutely. So our region up here in the northwest produces about 75% of the volume of Victorian wine. And most of those wines have, at some point in time ended up on every dining table of the world. They're quite widely known and grown, but at the moment we're in the middle of I suppose, a revolution moving away from producing the varieties that and the styles that people expect of us, and looking more towards sustainability and which varieties that we can produce here, especially with family-grown, family-owned brands like Zilzy, to get out onto the wine lists and the shelves at that pouring price point, or at that good retail price point that a lot of other regions can't at the moment because of obviously the cost of production and things like that. So we have beautiful sandy soils with limestone underneath. We get loads of sunshine hours. So we have a really dry climate. We don't have much disease pressure at all. So it means we don't have to use many chemicals. And we're able to get really delicious fruit ripeness, but retain that freshness and purity that you get from sandy soils and limestone. So we're really lucky. It's also, not only the wine bowl of Victoria, it's also the food bowl. So you can imagine a lot of the sort of, as a region, a lot of the fruits and vegetables come from here, olives, oranges, that kind of thing. So it's very much Mediterranean climate, cool nights, hot days. And yeah, we have the opportunity to make these really bright, beautiful wines here because of that combination of sunshine and soil.
I have to say, I don't have the wine with me right now, unfortunately, because I'm actually broadcasting from Europe, but I did get to taste this wine before I left for the States. And I would almost compare it more to a Bordeaux Sauvignon Blanc. I think it had a lot more in common with European Sauvignon Blancs than it did with a lot of the Australian and New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs that I've tasted.
Yeah, it is a fantastic example of a Sauvignon Blanc from the region. It's really driven by the tropical fruit and crisp acid characters that we get from our fruit. Coming from such a large winery, yeah, I really enjoy having the options of harvesting different areas of the vineyards for the blend. I'm really passionate about visiting the vineyards and tasting the berries throughout the harvest period to really start the blending in the vineyards. One particular patch, for example, I like to harvest a little bit earlier to really retain that crisp natural acid. And then there's other parcels that I like to sort of not necessarily ferment completely dry, just to add a little bit of natural sweetness to the wines as well.
And Courtney, just to review a little bit, tell us a little bit more about the soils that this is coming from and the altitude.
So it's sort of like a sandy loam, and areas of sandy clay as well. The altitude is about 150 feet above sea level. Yeah, and as Kim was saying, it is quite dry summers, low disease pressure. We have experienced a little bit of La Nina for the last couple of harvest periods, but which adds a little bit of change within the vineyard practices. But I think we've managed that really well, and yeah, managed to sort of minimize damage to the fruit.
It's fantastic. And I'm sorry, did I miss that? The altitude of the vineyards? You said
Around 150 feet above sea level.
Okay, not too high. Beautiful.
Yeah, so this region was, part of obviously a vast inland sea that, many, many, many years ago. Obviously, Australia is a very old patch of dirt. And so that's where we have that limestone underneath, and then a fine red sand over the top that's very, very old. And we all have to work really hard on our soil health, building carbon and things like that because of that, the age of the soils here. And actually the Murray-Darling region, the Victorian side, we are, I think something like 75% of our producers, growers, grape growers and whatnot in this region are certified sustainable as well.
So you're saying the Victoria side, does that slip into, is there part of that in New South Wales as well?
Murray-Darling does cross over the river. Yeah, there are some growers on the other side as well. So, but I know Zilsey is certified with sustainable wine growing in Australia, as are we and many other producers in the region. It's a real focus.
Yeah, we're really passionate about the sustainable wine growing, and 100% of the growers that we purchase fruit from are also accredited.
Great. And all your growers are on the Victoria side?
We also have growers, over in New South Wales.
Okay. So mix it up a little bit. What do you see as the major, if there are significant differences between the Victoria side and the New South Wales side?
You got this one, Kim, or sorry?
Look, it's both sides of the River Plain, so there's really not a lot of difference in terms of the style of the wine. I know Zilsey are focused, as we are, on focusing with Victoria in our brand. So a lot of wineries in the region might be using, a little bit of fruit from the other side, but people who are focused on brand Victoria are really bringing that more onto this side. But the fruit quality and the style is exactly the same. It's essentially the same region with a river running through the middle.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
the
Zilsey Victoria label is 100% Victorian. We don't use any of our New South Wales fruit for our Victorian labels.
Got it. Okay. Excellent. So our next one is going to be the Red Bank Chardonnay, and to talk about King Valley. I almost said Kim Valley. Kim, I understand you're designated to talk about King Valley as well.
Yeah, I can say a few words about King Valley. So King Valley is in the northeast. We've just gone from the northwest to the northeast of the state. So from one sort of end of the Murray River to the other, so that the headwaters of the Murray River are up there, and the King River flows south from those headwaters, and the Murray flows east. So the King Valley is a north-south running valley that is follows the King River. And at the bottom is its highest altitude part, which gets up to about 800 metres, but most of the vineyards are sort of on the slopes along the valley, typical wine region. It was settled in the early to mid 20th century, mostly with a lot of Italian migrants who originally planted tobacco farms in that area and also the Alpine valleys. And when tobacco went out of fashion, many of those growers changed over to wine. And so there's a real Italian accent in the valley. And one of their big marketing tools is Prosecco Road. It was really the place where Prosecco kind of bubbled up and became such a huge part of our culture, our production, but our drinking culture around the dinner tables in Australia. Obviously, there's challenges around that globally, but it's a huge product here. And it's cool climate. There's beautiful Sangioveses, Nebbiolos, all sorts of things coming out of there, as well as obviously your classic international varieties. It's a mix of larger producers like the Bordelais, who we'll talk about later today, and smaller family-owned brands. And look, it's definitely, I suppose, in Australia, really known for those Italian varieties. And they've been doing, you know, Sangiovese and Nebbiolo there since the 80s. So they're one of the first in Australia.
You're getting up close to you're heading toward the Alps there, right?
That's right, it
Australian
is. Yeah, the Victorian Alps, yeah.
Victorian Alps, cool. So high altitude, which again, cool climate.
Part of the region is, yeah, higher altitude. Part of it is lower, but yeah, in that sort of mid hundreds, up to 600-700 at the highest point. But yeah, mostly sort of 200 to 300 probably.
And generally speaking, the soil types tend to be more toward the fertile, more toward the rock.
That's probably out of my wheelhouse. Here we go. Deep red clay loam, sometimes tending more to grey and brown in colour, but they would be younger soils, obviously being in the mountains there, and you would expect more fertile. Around the river, obviously clay towards the bottom of the valley.
Great, thank you. And who can tell us about this beautiful Chardonnay?
Not me. Matt Fowles, you can jump in there. Come on.
Kate, I don't know this one, but I can talk to.
Please do.
Look, I think Victoria has Chardonnay from multiple different regions. I mean, we make really classic, beautiful, lean Chardonnays down in Yarra and then up in Beechworth. I think Chardonnay grows well in a number of different regions around Victoria. So King Valley, I'll let everyone taste this wine for themselves and see what they think. But it's not heavily oaked. Pressed into 1,800 litre oak, so it'd be very soft on the oak. I don't have it with me personally.
I know they're doing it shows they're doing some stirring of the leaves too, which should make it nice and creamy as well.
If everyone's had a chance to taste that wine, we can jump back to the Yarra, and we have Brendan.
Fantastic. So if you've got the Yering Station Pinot, please open that. And Brendan, if you want to introduce yourself and talk to us
good morning or good evening, everybody. I'm Brendan. I'm the senior winemaker at Yering Station in the Yarra Valley. So a little bit on the Yarra Valley. We're a cool climate growing region. We're 28 miles northeast of Melbourne CBD, so we're quite close to the city. It's quite a historic region for Victorian wine. It was the site of the first vineyard. Was planted in 1838, actually at the site of Yering Station, by some Scottish drovers moving some cattle for sale into market in Melbourne. But it was the subsequent parties that bought the property from the Ryrie brothers, the De Castellers, who were a part of a wave of Swiss immigration from some wine-growing producing regions in Switzerland that then really developed a region into, and by the turn of the 19th century, into quite a vast wine producing region. But by sort of 1910, I think all the vines had been removed, pulled out. None of those exist today, unfortunately. But that's because of market pressures, and change in palate towards more fortified wines. A lot of the land was returned to dairy. So the valley in itself is very much, can be split into two rough sub-regions. We've got the northern part, which is where Yering Station and our vineyards are, which is a little bit lower in altitude. So we're more around 300 feet, whereas the southern part can get up to about 1,300 feet above sea level. Wow. And they're quite distinctly different soil types as well. So the northern region where we are, we're more of a grey brown loam over of varying depths as well, over a yellow clay subsoil, which is often flecked with stone and rock as well. This is all derived from the ancient sandstones of the Great Dividing Range, which borders us to the north, and then we have the Dandenong Ranges to the south. So we've quite a firmly continental climate, but we do still have some Mediterranean influences given our proximity to Port Phillip Bay as well. So we do experience nice warm days, but really cool nights as well. So it's a wonderful region for producing cool climate varieties, particularly Chardonnay and Pinot, which is what the Yarra Valley, I think, is probably most well known for in this modern era.
Cool.
So our Pinot Noir, we have a range of sites, and I think something very special about the Yarra Valley, which makes it quite unique, is we have all these varying rolling hillsides. Some can be quite gentle and slope, some can be really quite steep. So depending on your aspect and the depth of soil, you can really get quite dramatic different mesoclimates, which really do influence the outcomes of the wines, and particularly for a variety so sensitive to where it's grown, like Pinot Noir. So some of our sites that maybe have a little bit more of a northern exposure, so they're catching a little bit more solar energy, they tend to be a little bit richer, a little bit darker in their fruit spectrum, a little bit more dark cherry, sometimes even a bit earthen. And some that have more of a southerly aspect, more easterly to their aspect, they're a bit cooler. And also if they have a deeper topsoil as well, they tend to become be a little bit more elegant and perfumed and brighter in their spectrum. So we pull in a lot of different batches from a lot of our different parcels of vineyards and a few growers as well. And so then we really get to assemble our blends from a really diverse array of sort of colours and spectrums in terms of flavour. So the village Pinot for us, we really like to see lots of cherry fruit, but quite perfumed as well, with some lovely florals in there too. The winemaking was a mixture of hand-picked and machine-picked fruit, but it's always gentle handling as best as possible. So the winery is well set up in that we can do everything by gravity. So so we don't pump any fruit around, avoiding any hard maceration. And then when we put the grapes into the press after a gentle ferment, we can use that by gravity too. So just really trying to avoid any astringent tannins. So what we'd like to see is a lovely fine knit tannin profile that can be quite plush and silky through the palate, giving lots of structure. And then given the cool climate and the slow growing seasons, we can retain a lot of nice, bright, natural acidity in the wines too.
Are you chilling the wines when it first comes into the winery? You're chilling the grapes? Any sort of
if it's hand harvested fruit, that'll come in sort of late in the evening, and it can often be quite warm, so that'll go into a fridge overnight, and then we can just stem in the morning, so it's nice and the berries stay nice and turgid and fresh. Yeah, and then if it's machine harvested, yes, we can run it through we'll go straight into the fermenter, and then we'll have the cooling on. We'll aim for a cold soak, usually of about 4 to 5 days, but sometimes if the ambient yeasts are getting pretty excited, we might kick off a bit earlier.
Are you doing morning harvest, night harvest at all?
If it's machine harvested, we will generally pick in the cool of the morning. So we sort of aim to have the vineyard picked and on the crush pad ready to go when the morning shift starts.
And what would you say, is your goal in terms of winemaking? Are you looking for a more New World style, European style? How would we compare this to wines from Burgundy versus Blauburgunder versus, cooler climate California Pinots or even Oregon Pinots?
Yeah, I think we're certainly a contemporary Australian style of Pinot is very New World perfumed. It should be very fruit focused, fruit forward. We're never a lot of producers as well. We don't use a lot of wild ferment with the Pinots. So thinking of wines like Burgundy, which are intensely structured and often can be quite savoury, we're looking for more elegant expressions of purity and things that really represent where they're grown. That's always a goal for us. And then certainly for in regards to oak as well, we do use new oak, and it's all barrel matured, but it's larger format. So we use 500-litre puncheons. So the oak impact is less, and we still aim to keep the percentage of new oak to a very subtle, supportive level, never to be, the prominent feature of the wine.
Got it. What do you think is the ageability of a wine like this?
Well, because they've got a lovely ripe tannin profile, even be it still finely knit, and lots of bright natural acidity, these wines have wonderful aging potential. We regularly look through museum wines, and we serve the museum wines that are offer at our cellar door, and that are 10 years old plus, and they're certainly not primary fruit focused anymore. They've got developed lots of lovely tertiary character and complexity, but they still have that lovely fresh acid still prominent.
And a quick question, not necessarily about the wine at this point, but because of your vicinity to Melbourne, which is a great city, great food city. Again, I know that Sydney tends to get a lot of the attention, but Melbourne, I've personally found is a fantastic food city, a little bit low key, a little bit more low key than say Sydney, but wonderful restaurants, great food. Because of your vicinity to Melbourne, do you get a lot of wine country visitors coming up from Melbourne, or do you have a situation where a lot of producers from the Yarra Valley will have tasting rooms in Melbourne? Is there anything like that going on?
No, because given our proximity, as you say, Lars, we're very fortunate to receive a lot of visitation from wine tourists, and it's not just wine in the region as well. We've got a lot of other culinary delights out here in the Yarra Valley, and breweries. Another and the Hills of Sanctuary as well. So it's no, our cellar door, we're very busy, open 364 days a year, and we have a restaurant as well, which is just for lunch, but it's a great spot.
Cool. Great reason to visit. All right. Thank you, Brendan. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Lars. Thanks, everybody.
Brendan, Lars, we did have Bob Podlinski, I think, wrote in an article during the year that the Yarra Valley was Australia's Burgundy. Seen that a couple of times. I think, yeah, the Pinot and Chardonnay coming out of that region are fantastic.
Bob Podlinski, the MW, the SOMM Journal. Fantastic. Thank you. So the next one you're going to want to open is the Tellurian GSM. You have that, and here to speak about it is Matt Talbot. Welcome, Matt. Now, you just got back from some travels, right?
Yeah, I landed yesterday morning about this time. So I just got back from a 3-week trip through the States with Tellurian. So North Carolina for a week, Texas for a good part of a week, Missouri for a few days, and then back through Montana for a week, flying out of Billings. So yeah, it was a bit of a whirlwind, sort of waking up in different cities, different days, and not knowing where we were, but it was fun. So we've done two trips through the state. We've been in the States for 5 weeks this year already. So we're in sort of select states at the moment with Tellurian, for 5 or 6. It's sort of our focus, I guess. And yeah, it's been fun. The wines have been well received, and it's good to have this wine in this lineup, because this is one that's been a bit of a door opener, I think, for us. With a lot of buyers sort of seeing a lot of Australian Shiraz, I guess, and that sort of leads me into Heathcote, which is really well known for Shiraz. And at home, when people look at Shiraz, it's Barossa, McLaren in South Australia, but Heathcote for Victoria is sort of the big one for Shiraz, and half of our region is planted to Shiraz. So that lends itself to that, that variety sort of leading the crop. But a little bit about Tellurian, we were established in 2002, so relatively newish, I guess, to the region, but small, family owned. We do about 10,000 dozen as a total production. But we have a bit of a Southern Rhone influence in our variety. So obviously Grenache, Shiraz, Mourvèdre and Carignan in reds. And we've also now got Marsanne, Roussanne, Viognier, Grenache Gris in the white. So we're really focusing on those varieties, and also lucky enough to have some Italian varieties from the Chalmers family we planted a few years ago as well, which are working really well in our region. But Grenache is something we're focusing on, and we're probably looking at adjusting our vineyard makeup a little bit. You know, as the region's 50% Shiraz, our vineyard probably 50% Shiraz as well. But there's a demand for Grenache, and I think it's due to probably stylistically how that variety's changed in the way its makeup. You know, 10 years ago, Grenache was made like Shiraz and pushed quite hard and chase ripeness and trying to extract tannin. It came quite non-varietal, but I think if you've got this wine in the glass, for us, we sort of handle Grenache a bit like Pinot, and you know, interesting listening to how Brendan handles Pinot Noir. But Grenache is quite a pretty variety. It is quite aromatic. So in our vineyard, we have some traditional trellis planted Grenache, and then we've also got now 2 blocks of bushvine Grenache, which we're sort of working with, and it's completely different aspects of fruit and intensity and flavor, and we pick those separately, and we vinify the Grenache separately, bushvine and trellis. We do some whole cluster in the Grenache to sort of amplify the aromatics, and really keep the prettiness in it. So like some Pinot Noir down in Yarra is done with, whole bunch. We're not going crazy with whole bunch, but really amplifying aromatics and pushing the prettiness. And our house style for this blend, we always sort of aim towards a 60-30-10 split. And that's always to have the Grenache a high proportion. And it is about the pure drinkability of this wine. And that's what the last 3 weeks we sort of saw by, was quite surprised getting this in the glass, was the sort of how light on its feet it was, with that Grenache being quite prominent. Now, this wine might be, 60-30-10 is sort of a house style, but this one comes in at 57-35. So it's not quite that, but we sort of aim for that. All the varieties are done, vinified separately, and then we sort of blend them back together at the end. So,
okay,
yeah, good to have a good lick of Shiraz, which sort of gives it the length and drive, and then Mourvedre sort of fills in some pockets. But Grenache is definitely the sort of upfront, pretty aromatics that we're trying to build, and quite a drinkable variety. It's we call it quite smashable at home sometimes, Grenache, and it's definitely on trend. It only makes up a very small 3 to 5% of our region, but I think moving forward, we'll see a lot more Grenache going in.
Cool, smashable. I like that term. I'm going to start using.
Well, America's has the patio pounders, so I
That's
picked
right.
that term
Porch
up. But
pounders.
then porch pounders, yeah. So I sort of, but we're a bit more crass, I guess, and smashable is something we use a bit when describing a wine. So this is all certified organic fruit with Silurian as well. So we have a blend of stainless steel, concrete, and in the last few years we've played around with a little bit of terracotta. And this year we'll see our first 100% bushvine straight Grenache, and then outside of that we'll also do a very small 100% bushvine amphora Grenache will come out for a bit of interest. So, but no, it's a wine that just the pure drinkability about this wine is what we like, and I think it's a style that the punters in the States have really enjoyed as well.
Excellent. So tell us a little bit about, so you're talking about using amphora, which is something that we've seen a lot in Europe and starting a little bit in the States. How does that line up with, let's say, the Australian style of winemaking compared to what's going on with Syrah and Grenache in the Rhone or in other places in Southern Europe? Is the amphora a little bit of a game changer for Australian style?
I don't think we're quite sold on it yet. It's an expensive proposition to get into, and if you move down that path, and it's definitely building a level of interest in the wine. Some of the wines, I guess, depending on year, can be quite polarizing as a single sort of wine out of amphora. So it's interesting this 1 year, the bushvine being a little bit more gnarly in its makeup. It's got some more attitude, I guess, in its sort of tannic structure that it might deal with the amphora. We did a Shiraz in it a couple of years ago, and in the lineup of Shiraz that just stuck out, it was quite earthy, and it really was an intense wine. And we wouldn't have bottled that, but there's a lot of people in Australia, I'm not sure about the Victorian piece, but I know Yangara and McLaren Vale are, hugely invested in terracotta and for a lot of their wines. But I think for us, it'll be a bit just like seasoning. Really, it's nice to have them. It's nice to add some layers and depth and texture into those wines. And I don't think it'll be a thing we invest heavily in. Like I said, they're not the greatest vessel in a winery that's hard surfaces and forklifts and lots of moving parts. They're quite fragile. So I sort of tucked them in the corner and
smashable.
Smashable. Yeah, very much so. But I think it's interest, and we're seeing a lot of interest in concrete, Italian concrete coming over, which is not overly sustainable, but a lot of different people just trying different fermentation styles. I think a bit of it is driven.
Australia, you can't make your own concrete.
Well, there is a guy in Central Victoria who's got some locally made concrete, which is interesting stuff. But I think it's added interest, with just some added, like I said, the seasoning. I don't think we're going to go down that path of 100% terracotta. It's probably not our style. I think a lot of it is driven by image, and terracotta's cool and social media, but it's, it is an interesting thing to work with.
Okay, thank you for that. Another question from my buddy Nick up in Boston. In Heathcote, are you seeing a little bit more growth or popularity with Mourvedre? Is that a lot about Syrah and Grenache?
Probably not as a single variety. I think it's a really nice wine. We did make a single variety in 2012 and took about 5 years to sell, I think. So probably something that isn't ticking. I think it's an interesting variety, and we see it a bit with other things like Viognier, and other winemakers can chat about it too, about varieties that are hard to pronounce. And Mourvedre is one of those ones that on a label by itself, people are they feel a bit awkward pronouncing that. And Viognier gets all sorts of pronunciations around the world when you present it. But I think it's an interesting variety, and we have made it once before, but we actually use a bit of it in another wine, and we call it Mataro in that, just to confuse the conversation anymore. But Mataro, I think, is that. But no, it's got a bit more guts than the Grenache. But we have done it in the past, but haven't seen a big ask for it, I guess, from the trade as a single variety.
Right, understood. Okay. Just nice comment from Frederick. He was thinking what I was thinking too when you said you were in the Carolinas. Clearly, you were back enough to miss the bad weather there, the storm.
I think I flew out. We had an amazing week of weather, very hot and very sweaty, and then I think I flew out on the Friday and woke up in Dallas. Then it was like a completely different world, and I was working with a guy from Wilmington who was chasing, running away from floods and roads I'd been on that didn't exist, and it was pretty crazy, and had some friends in Tampa, and they were, getting out of town as well. So I literally just missed it by about a day. So pretty wild.
Everything. And really fast question, and we got to move on. Who was your importer in the US? So
Marquis is our importer, Marquis Selections, and they're based up in Kansas City, Missouri.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All
so
right.
We're in the current markets for us is North Carolina, South Carolina, Texas, California, and Missouri, and Montana currently. Very
cool. Hopefully that grows for everybody.
Yeah.
So our next wine to open is the ladies who shoot their lunch, and Matt Fowles is here to tell us about it. Matt, welcome.
Thank you. G'day, gang. Really happy to have you all on board and listening in today. So the Strathbogie Ranges, we've been in the river valleys generally, and now we're climbing up into the mountains, and you can see that elevation on the screen. So we're nearly 1,700 feet above sea level at our place. We have 2 vineyards and we grow 13 different varieties. But it's interesting with the Strathbogies, I've made a point of asking people when they visit, and when I'm talking people, educated wine people like yourselves or press, when they come to our region, the question I always ask is, does the Strathbogies remind you of anywhere else in the world? And I've yet to have anyone say that. And I think in our game, unique as a word is often overused, but I really feel the Strathbogies is different. And part of the reason is because of the ancient soil Kim was talking about in Australia. You know, we've got seriously, seriously ancient soil. And in the case of the Strathbogie ranges, I look at it as almost like a failed volcano. This was under the ocean. The rock tried to push up through the sedimentary layer and it didn't really happen. And so you have this granite massif, and you can see in that image that you can see the exposed rock. So one of the features of being in a hilltop as opposed to a valley is over the millions and millions of years, it's a process called de-roofing, where that sedimentary layer actually washes down into the valley, steadily erodes. And so what we have left is really bedrock, and our soils are decomposed granite. So there are some regions in Australia in those valleys that would talk about, you know, this patch of soil here, another different patch of soil there. But on our mountaintop, because we've weathered down to bedrock, we're remarkably uniform across the sites. So in our experience of the Strathbogies, we look at things like clonal diversity is a very important part of what we do. Site selection based on aspect. So we're about 60 miles north of the Yarra Valley, and then obviously the really different feature of our region is the elevation. And so aspect, we've got on a granite massif, which is essentially a big rock peninsula, we have vineyards sloping to the north and west, I should say, the south and east. So we try and have a spread of blocks of the same variety on different aspects to add options and so complexity to the wine. A lot of our wines in Australia are single vineyard, so we need to find ways to build complexity into it. But the other thing, you know, when I get around, I was just in the States as well, Matt, and tracking around the South as well. And there's a lot of excitement about the wine, which is really pleasing. But one of the things that surprises people is we actually get flurries of snow in the Strathbogie ranges. So, you know, it's genuinely cool climate. We get that large diurnal shift. It's warm in summer for sure. And we'll be out in the vineyard in t-shirt and shorts. But by the evening, you want to wear a jacket or a light jumper. You know, it actually gets cool enough that it's almost uncomfortable eating outside. As you know, these are real physical examples of what we experience in the region. We grow Mourvedre as well, so that's interesting. We do make a single varietal Mourvedre, and then we grow a whole range of other things. We're just branching out into Gamay, Sangiovese, Pinot Noir is a big focus for us. But what we're looking at today is the Shiraz. So in the world of Shiraz, this is a really fun wine to take blind. If you don't have an Australian accent, take blind to a wine tasting and see where people place it in the world, because I've got some friends who are, you know, doing their, you know, SOMM stuff or their Master of Wine stuff. And it's a really fun wine to sort of wrong foot people. You know, people talk about Syrah, we're absolutely at that end. So we're looking for, you know, all the red fruits and spice that come from a climate like ours. So different clones, lots of smaller winemaking treatment. Wild fermentation is a feature of this wine and a lot of what we do in the winery. One of the things we're looking for, people ask, why did you call it ladies who shoot their lunch? Sometimes it's not a popular view, but I'm actually a very keen hunter, and I've learned to say not a redneck despite how I look. It's actually an interest in understanding where your food and wine comes from. So for me, if I was going to be a meat eater, I wanted to face the reality of that. It was important to me. And so I've learned to hunt from the land. And when I started eating a lot of wild meat, it has a very different texture and intensity to farmed meat. And we're also farmers. We raise sheep. And the qualities of farm meat versus wild meat, they're actually radically different in the way that cool climate wines and warmer climate wines are so very different. And when I was eating a lot of wild meat, which is incredibly good for you, and in an Australian context, we have a very fragile ecosystem, and a lot of these introduced animals, we're compelled to control by government, which includes poisoning, which I'm not prepared to do. So part of my hunting is based on conservation and feeding my family. But the style of wine that I look for when matching to wild meat is very elevated aroma to match the potency of wild meat, and then a very silky texture, which is important when wild meat's so lean and dense. We don't want something that's also very challenging to the palate. So look, that is the genesis of the idea of Ladies Who Shoot Their Lunch as a wine and style. And so what I'm looking for is that very elevated aroma and silky texture. And with this wine, one of the ways we achieve that, we actually reserve a parcel that we mature in stainless steel. So we really want that primary aromatic lift. But we also mature the wine in these 3 5,000 litre English oak casks. So I'm 6'4", they're big enough that I can actually stand up inside them. 150-year-old. We're not getting any tannin contribution, oak flavour contribution. These are just vessels that have very thick staves, so you get that retention of primary aroma, but also you get a softening of the texture, and you get this lovely, gentle, savoury layer from 150 years of good bacteria running around those casks. So we piece this together with a lot of parcels, as I say, with a focus on aromatic intensity and gentle handling. And yeah, I hope this is a wine that, is a wine that could wrong-foot people about some of the more traditional approaches to Shiraz in Australia. It's absolutely Victorian to its core, and then you'll see the shades of Victoria right through it.
Fantastic. That was great. I had a lot of questions and you answered them all. So I appreciate that.
Just on that wine, we had a group out from Korea, and a girl very eloquently said that this is a wine that makes her nose happy. So I think you're getting the aromatics there, Matt.
It's very hard doing these things and not having feedback about the wine. I often find it easier to have a discussion around it. But anyway, I hope you enjoy it. It's proudly Victorian.
Cool. If you guys have any comments on the wines, feel free to post them in the Q&A, and we'll communicate those on. So our next wine is the Mount Langi Cliff Edge Shiraz. And I don't know, we haven't heard from Kim for a while. Resident expert on all things Victoria. Tell us a little bit about the Grampians, another dramatic area with these fantastic.
Well, I'm Western, like in this great state of ours. The Grampians is it's such a great set of regions and wines that you've curated today, actually, because it really does show the diversity of the regions. And while it looks like a tiny state, there is a lot going on. And I drove from one end of the other to it of Victoria with the kids on school holidays last week, and it is big. It's big. So the Grampians is in the western part of the state, and it's a couple of 100 kilometres north from the ocean, which is the Great Ocean Road facing Antarctica, basically. And it's a mountainous granite area. The actual GI of Grampians is huge, but the amount of vineyards is quite small. But they were first planted in the region in the 1860s, so some of the earliest Victorian vineyards. And there's especially famous vineyard there, Best's, which was planted up by an adventurous vigneron who planted 100 different grape varieties there, the Concongela vineyard. And some of them still to this day are unrecognised, and we've even got things like, they at Best even have things like Dolcetto and Pinot Meunier and things that go all the way back to the 1860s, and the original vines are still living. It's a wonderful resource for the world of wine. Sparkling wines, big production, a big popular production in the early days there, and there's Seppelt's winery there, which has beautiful long underground aging caves for sparkling traditional sparkling production. But it's mostly known for Shiraz these days and Cabernet. Winters are cold, but summers are warm, like many regions. It's dry, doesn't have a lot of rainfall, but the altitude is variable. Although most of the vineyards are in those mid altitude, not super high. And the classic character of Shiraz from say the Grampians or the Pyrenees as opposed to Heathcote, and I'd say the Grampians and Heathcote that you've just heard from Tellurian are the two main regions recognised for Shiraz in Victoria. We grow Shiraz in every region in Victoria, so there are many different styles like Strathbogie, obviously, which is a unique style of its own, but Grampians Shiraz, that white pepper that you get from that Grampians Shiraz, and I haven't tried this one. Hopefully it doesn't prove me wrong, but it's something that I see in those wines from that region, and it's an exciting region, small in size but great in stature.
It's cool that it's one of the more historical areas too. Very interesting. Excellent. Well, stay on tune there, Kim. You mentioned Nero d'Avola. You have the Chalmers Nero d'Avola. Is our next wine to taste. And Kim is going to continue the dialogue here and tell us a little bit about Heathcote and the Nero d'Avola there.
Perfect. Kate, if you just want to go back to that photo, the previous slide, I'll talk a bit about the region first, if that's okay. So this is a photograph of our vineyard, very creatively named the Top Block because it's on the top of the hill. But Heathcote has a really cool geological history, and a bit like what Matt said about Strathbogie, the volcano that never happened. Well, this is the one that did. Heathcote is a long, narrow region. It's something like 140 kilometres long, but only about 30 kilometres wide at the top. And it runs north-south. So about 3/4 or 2/3 of the way down the region is the township of Heathcote, and then it sort of splits off in the vineyards split off in two directions at the bottom of the region. And at the bottom of the region, it meets up with Macedon, which is the coldest mainland climate wine region, possibly even the coldest in Australia, where they make sparkling and Riesling, and it's granitic and looks a little bit like the photos that Matt showed of Strathbogie, granite boulders on top of hills, etc. The northern part of Heathcote, where our vineyard is, so we're almost at the very tippy top of the GI, is only about 100 kilometres from the Murray River. So it is almost, a couple of degrees different from north to south. Tellurian, you heard Matt talk about Tellurian, is about smack bang in the middle in terms of that north to south. So from the township to the top of the GI, most of the vineyards are focused in a very narrow band, and that band represents 3 intersecting fault lines, Mount Williams and a couple of others that pushed up this ridge that runs almost directly north-south, the Mount Camel Range, about 350 million years ago. Prior to that, we were under the seafloor, like the Murray-Darling. It was low and flat. So we've got this really interesting mix on the Mount Camel Range, and you can see in that photo the redness of the soil. It's iron-rich. So we've had this sort of plate movement where two tectonic plates pushed against each other, and then volcanic activity in that 500 to 350 million years ago period. Cambrian soil is the nickname that gets bandied about in Heathcote because of the age of that geology, before that having been under the sea. So we've got this really unique mix of these sort of basalt and dolerite and shale and sandstone and ironstone and all sorts of stuff, with fractured limestone and quartz through it, because previously it was limestone under the sea, and so it's a really interesting complex mix. The top of the ridge, as you can see from this photo, is degraded and devolved. The topsoil's all at the bottom of the hill, like Matt said. So the top of the hill is mostly rock. When we're planting a vineyard up there like this one, we actually have to get a drill to drill the holes to put the posts in, because you can't actually just put them in the normal way that you would in soil, because it's mostly rock. So the vines in this photo, even though they're quite small in stature, are more than 10 years old. The vineyard was planted in 2009, and we've currently got 40 hectares under vine, of which about 3 hectares is Shiraz, because, you know, it'd be rude not to. And the rest is 26 other varieties, mostly Italian. And what you can see in this photo here is Aglianico, Sagrantino, and Nera d'Avola. So in the distance, the furthest away block is Nera d'Avola. But Matt, if we turned a little bit left from this photo, we could just about see your place, I reckon. The ridge is really out in the middle of nowhere. And so this is east facing. So we're standing north and we're looking south right now in this photo. So that vineyard is running from the top of the hill down the hill, and the rows are oriented east-west. Now, this is a really important part of our viticulture at Chalmers. We have evolved as wine growers and producers, and we're much more of a farming viticulture family than we are wine. We got into wine later, but we've evolved as growers in hot places and dry places. And so our focus has been on maintaining freshness and vibrancy and great acidity and minimizing water use and minimizing heat stress in our vineyards. So by planting the rows east-west, which is counterintuitive to, you know, French traditional viticulture knowledge, you're actually, the sun's passing directly overhead of your vineyard rows. So you're not getting direct exposure onto your grapes, which is really important when it's bloody hot in the middle of summer. And it allows really, really even ripening and dappled light. So you do maintain much, much better acidity. But part of what we've done in, I guess, kind of engineering our vineyards, or making choices, making what we believe are future-proofing sort of choices around viticulture in this region, and also the Murray-Darling, is selecting grape varieties and grafting them onto rootstocks, which give us the advantages that we want. So our primary goal when we're selecting what varieties we want to work with is high natural acidity, late ripening, moderate yield. We want to have good vigor, which is important so that you can back off on the inputs. So if the vine is naturally really strong, you don't need to feed it, you don't need to water it as much. So that means you can really reduce your inputs and manage your yield better. So we've ended up, after 30 years of doing this, my family also has a grapevine nursery. So we're quite an interesting, vertically integrated vine, grape and wine family, in that we grow baby vines and sell them to other vineyards. We would have sold probably 35 million vines in the 30 years, 40 years we've been producing grapevines, which, I don't know, would be roughly 10 to 15% of the planted area in Australia. You know, 500,000 of those, it's nearly 3 million now of those vines have been alternative varieties, mostly Italian. So we, you know, have focused on this, but promoted it also around Australia. And I think Victoria is uniquely poised to branch out and find our symbiosis. Like Matt said, you know, multiple varieties. We have the same as does Tellurian. Of course, we can all do, you know, the classics well, but to be able to really, I suppose, really kind of draw out that regional identity from our soils and our climates and our specific cultures in our regions, is to find these varieties that can translate those stories best. So having more different varieties to choose from is about translating our land and our story and our place into the bottle in a way that means something to us. So obviously, it's very easy to make a touch point against the classic Italian varieties from wherever they came from, Sicily or Sardinia or whatever. As I said, we're a growing family. At the time we started making wines from these varieties, my mum and dad had never even tried a glass of Nero d'Avola from Sicily or a glass of Vermentino from Sardinia. That's not what they were interested in. They're interested in, how are these vines performing in our backyard? And of the 70 odd varieties that we had in the nursery collection, we decided to make wines out of those the ones that looked like they were happiest in their new environment. And that's how we decided what wines would go into the Chalmers range. And so we introduced all the varieties in the late 90s. The first Chalmers wines were produced in 2003. And, you know, we've been introduced those wines as a sort of marketing tool for the nursery, and the brand has stayed. So Chalmers is, again, quite a hands-off method, especially when we're making the first versions of a new variety. We don't want to impose too much oak or too much hand of winemaker onto these wines. We really want them to sing their own song, because otherwise we don't know if they really are well adapted to their new environment or not, if we're fixing or modifying the wine in the wineries. So all our wines are wild ferments. The Nera d'Avola that you have in front of you is it's machine picked, destemmed in the vineyard. So it comes in just as whole berries and goes straight into the fermenter as whole berries. So it begins its ferment in those whole berries, which gives it a slight touch of a sort of carbonic, bright, juby fruit on the nose. But it finishes ferment as a standard, but the berries break down and away you go. And so it's all stainless steel. It does not go anywhere near a barrel, but there is a hint of vanilla and cinnamon in this wine. And often when people try it blind, they think that there is some new oak in there, which there is absolutely not. That is the spice from the variety. It also has a sort of tarry note, the Nera d'Avola, which also, as does the Heathcote region. So you might have picked that up in the GSM. You might pick it up in this next de Bordeaux wine that we're going to try. But that sort of volcanic history of the geology there gives a really distinct smoky, charry undertone that you can recognise in wines from Heathcote, especially reds, but in the whites that appears as a sort of really mineral quality. But Nera d'Avola has been one of the big success stories. We introduced it to Australia. It didn't exist here before. And there's now probably about 60 different producers making Nera d'Avola. There's regional identity in the styles. McLaren Vale has quite a few growers. Central Victoria, the Northwest. It is growing all around the place, and it makes that what right now in Australia at least is that really sweet spot of a mid-weight, bright-fruited, slightly chillable red. You know, you can put it in the ice bucket on a hot day, but it's not oversimplified. That brightness and the fruit is attractive, but underneath it does have structure and finesse, and it does show its Heathcote roots, and it rides that line beautifully of, what do we say, smashable and serious. So there you have it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kim. Appreciate that. So our next wine is the de Bordeaux Wood Fired, still in Heathcote.
Yeah, we don't have Steve with us. The de Bordeaux family are third generation. They're actually based down in Yarra Valley. Steve Webber would be the winemaker for this wine, but for their wood-fired range, they source from Heathcote. So Kim, I think, has given us a fantastic description of Heathcote. I'm not sure why they've called it wood-fired. I know that it definitely it pairs well with sort of those barbecued meats. I don't think they char their barrels like the bourbon, but I'm not sure if anyone can shed light on the name. But yeah, excellent family, the de Bordeaux family, and source, I think, their whole wood-fired range out of Heathcote, from my understanding.
Cool. Well, that's a historic name there as well, isn't it? Fantastic. All right. Well, we hope everybody enjoyed these. The wine tubes was a relatively new thing for us, and what I see is a lot of positive reaction to them coming in from the comments. So people enjoyed being able to taste a multiple number of wines. We were able to get more wine out that way in general, and hope you guys enjoyed it. Our thanks to our friends at the SOMM Foundation, and thanks to all of you. Thank you to the winemakers for getting up so early. There you've got a little bit of information on the wines.
Yeah, I would like to also, I'm not sure if he wants to jump on and say hi, but introduce Mickey Dean, who's our business development manager. Hey, Mickey, based in New York.
Hello.
So
sorry for the boring accent, everyone, but but
all these wines are available in the US. So yeah, Mickey, jump in.
yeah, please. That's my contact information. If you're interested in learning more about distributors in your area, or any pricing or requests for samples, please come through me, and I'll be happy to facilitate whatever you may need.
All right. Excellent. Well, thank you all again. Just a reminder that this webinar was recorded. It'll be on sommjournal.com under webinars. We have a nice library of educational webinars there. It's also on our Facebook platform. And as you guys know, SOMM Journal is complimentary to the trade. I assume everybody here is subscribed, but if you're not, drop me a note, lars@sommjournal.com. Pretty straightforward email address. Would love to hear from you and stay in touch. And thank you, and have a great evening, everybody. And have a great spring in Victoria, folks.
Thank you,
Thank you all.
Lars. Yep, the sun has come up.
Excellent.
Have a great day, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye now.